Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I know it's morning. I'm not a morning person myself, but I hope that we can make this as exciting, as fun as possible. And I promise that this is super helpful, not only for designers, but pretty much for everyone who wants to be successful in some way in today's crazy world. And before I dig into the content a bit, I wanted to hear from the audience that we have here now. If you can choose one thing, if you can type into chat, what do you think is the single most important thing for a designer to have to be successful in the world? I'm willing to give you like 30, 40 seconds. If you can type one word into a chat that you feel that that's really the most essential thing for designers to have to be successful in today's world. It would be great to see or hear, what actually you think: empathy, imagination, skill, yes, very good, color sense, originality, and money, yes. Always extremely helpful to have money, of course, passion, result-oriented, yes, amazing, amazing. Thank you very much for sharing. I think these are pretty much on point. Some of them are, of course, more relevant than others. Let's get into content for today. So what I want to talk about first is some of the challenges that we face in today's world, and there are many of them. Second one, I want to introduce a meta theme for the whole presentation, some sort of an overarching theme that will be with us during the session. Then I want to talk about communication. I want to talk about attitude. I want to talk about business savviness, networking, and then lastly, design fundamentals. And you might be thinking why this guy is talking about so many things which are not necessarily design related, but I can tell from my experience that if you have the best knowledge of design technology, design methodology, design fundamentals, it might not be necessarily enough for you to be successful in this world. And I think that's why some of the major topics that I want to go through are actually sometimes even more important than design itself. And I want to start with the challenges. And first, I want to talk about immature design markets, which is something that is a reality, in Southeast Asia, especially right now, is that you can imagine problems like, for example, companies not understanding what is the value of design. They might need, let's say, UX UI designers for a researcher role. It's a bit unclear all the time. You have to explain what is design about. So it's a very challenging environment to be in overall. Limited opportunities for growth, you can imagine as something which, especially in small and medium companies, like you have certain ceiling or limits where basically you can't grow above them, especially if you're designers. So for example, in a startup where you are at a senior designer position, like where is the place for you if you want to grow more? And of course, then we have an impact of the pandemic, which obviously is creating economic slowdown, volatile times in the markets, kind of uncertain future. And that's why I feel it's so important to talk about these topics, right now, for you to be able to navigate this and be successful eventually in the future. The meta theme I want to introduce, and I've been thinking about this a lot during the last couple of months, is that I think that the success of a designer is largely defined by how well they can connect with the non-design world. And it essentially means, that how I see it as that your success as a designer is really defined largely by how well you can connect with people and businesses who are not design first. Entrepreneurs, data scientists, engineers, developers, consultants in some cases, business owners, CEOs, and how well you can actually navigate and connect with them. I think that's the definition and difference between being a successful designer and being somebody who's perhaps just a good designer. So this team is going to be with us across the slides, and you can always keep it in mind. First big topic I want to talk about is communication, because communication overall is so important, and not only verbal communication, but also written communication. And why it's so important? Because you have to be able to really explain well your decision-making, thinking, and reasoning. And this is especially true when you, for example, applying for a new job. And I'm speaking from my own experience when I did like 70 hiring interviews during the last 2 years. And if you are not able to explain, the logic and the reasoning behind each step in your design process and why you actually do it, you might be selling yourself short. It might create a huge range of problems about you not being confident enough in front of a future employee, for example. And just the ability to explain like what you do and how and why is it actually beneficial for the business or for the people that you're talking to is absolutely crucial. And you can see at the bottom of the left, I prepared for you like this sort of a little action boxes where you can always see, what you can do almost every day or at least weekly to improve for this specific topic I'm talking about. So you can see that in terms of communication and explanation, it's really good to practice to explaining design to people who never heard about design before. Next one is that the more senior you grow, the more responsibilities you're going to have as a designer, as a manager, as a director, and so on and so on. Communication will take a center stage in your life. Perhaps eventually in the future is going to be always about design, yes, but the ability of yours to communicate well and perhaps pitch and present is just going to be so crucial that this can't be overlooked. And, this is very hard for people to practice. So what I would like to recommend is that talk to your supervisors, talk to your managers and tell them, please put me into situations where I can practice in real scenarios, in front of a client, in front of my more senior colleagues or something like that, because that might be the only way how you can get better. And this will really almost define your career eventually in the future, because the communication aspect of being a good designer and successful designer is truly essential. Second topic I want to talk about is attitude. And this is something that I'm personally experiencing every day. And the first sort of a subsection of attitude is I want to say that you should always do more than you ask, basically, because, the briefs that you're going to get, the requirements, the inquiries that you're going to get from clients or from people who are more senior than you, people always expect that that's going to be like the bare minimum that you will do. So you always have to raise the bar and think creatively, what can I do more to really, impress people and amaze, and always think about this, not in a like overworking sort of a like a mindset. You need to think about creatively how you can deliver more than people expect, but not kill yourself in the process, of course. So it can be maybe, what Kelly mentioned just before me, maybe investing a bit more time into research and really, communicate the aspect of your design from a research perspective, for example, or something, or dive deeper into the business impact of your design or something. Like creatively think about how can you deliver more than the bare minimum that is asked from you. Second one is, and this is one of my favorite quotes ever. I'm not even sure if it's a quote, but it's always better to do something and be criticized for it rather than do nothing and criticize others, and it's so true, right? Like, it's much better to always go for it and try to bring something to life rather than always be in a planning stage and think about stuff. And I'm sure everyone on this call, in this meeting or in this session have a huge range of ideas. But it only matters in the world right now, how many of those ideas you can bring to life to make a real impact. So don't worry about what anyone thinks, you can always ignore the naysayers and everyone, but just always try to put your energy and time into doing something, rather than just be talking about it and just keep it within the realms of, only in your head, because that will never count, sadly. Last one for attitude is perhaps the biggest one for me, at least, because I think it's so important, and I can see it with my team every day, is that world is moving super fast, and people who wait, they're gonna be left behind. And what I mean by that is that you have to be always the proactive one. And especially now when most people working remotely, you always need to have that energy to be initiator of engagements, of sessions, of discussions. Because let's say that, you know, people who are, for example, your counselors or your seniors, you know, they are most of the time super busy people. They don't really have time to check on everyone all the time, especially if it's a large company. So this applies to anyone. Like, never wait, never stay idle, be proactive all the time, even if it's hard, of course, sometimes, and always reach out first. Because if you don't do that, you know, what can happen is that nothing might happen in the end. So I think being proactive and do something on your own without being nudged to do it, you know, I think that's one of the biggest assets that you can bring to the team. If you work in remotely and if you work in an office, it's the same case. Next topic I want to talk about is business savviness. And I think this sometimes it's a bit tricky for creative people or for designers, but I think that especially after the pandemic, I think this is going to be a team that's going to totally separate people who are successful, making good money and providing for their families, if I can say it like that, and people who are just like kind of like, you know, barely making it through, because design is just one piece of a bigger business puzzle. Even it's sometimes sad to hear in a way, but your design just always needs to be linked, you know, together with the larger business objectives for the company that you're working for. And you always have to be able to explain impact and describe the impact of your work. You know, what you gonna improve? Are you gonna be making more money? Is your design gonna be making more money for the company? Are you gonna bring more consumers for the company? Are you gonna increase conversion rates? You know, are you gonna save costs for the company? Always focus on describing the impact. It doesn't have to be always about money. It can even be about something like, for example, you saving time for users, for your consumers, because productivity there's a huge value in there as well. But the impact of your work is absolutely must have for any designer that wants to be successful, and even more so after the COVID-19 pandemic right now. And please remember the action point here for this slide. You know, take your time to understand how the company you work for makes money. This can be difficult sometimes, but it's gonna really work wonders for you eventually in the future. Because if you're working in a startup, you're working in a corporation, you're working in a medium-sized company, if you invest time into understanding how the business actually is making money, it's gonna be much easier for you to connect your designs together with a bigger business puzzle, and you will be able to find the common ground with all the non-design people around you. And don't be afraid of it, right? I like this sort of a design mindset or creative mindset for people is sometimes, you know, a bit scary. Like I'm like this creative type of person, you know, I don't understand business. I don't want to understand it. It's really not that scary if you think about it. The core business principles are really simple. It's not a rocket science. It just takes a bit of time to understand the kind of you know, the basic buckets. It's really one of the best investments that you can make as a designer, to invest time into learning simple basic business frameworks, you know, increasing revenue, saving costs, productivity metrics. So take some time understanding those, because it's gonna really give you a dramatic boost for your career, you know, and you wanna just grow more and become a leader, for example. You know, this is gonna be even more and more important as you go step by step. And networking, right? One of my good friends here in the region, he said that if you wanna make it work, if you wanna make it big, network. And I think sometimes we're forgetting that the world is really huge. It's really good idea to explore beyond your current bubble, beyond your current company, beyond your city, beyond your region, you know, try to create a diverse group of connections, and not only designers, any type of people that you can imagine. You never know when it's going to be helpful for you, or you never know when this can be really some sort of a benefit to your life eventually in the future, because the world is huge. Don't be just basically living in this smaller bubble within a city, region, or country. Just think big, think global, and try to be able to connect and create connections with people across the world, especially now when everything is remote anyway, and work on that continuously. And how to connect with people? I think the best way how to go about connecting with people is create and produce something that will add value to their lives, you know, and this can be totally different for every designer. You can write, you can create motion design, you can create illustrations, you can basically create, you know, articles, case studies, data visualization, research papers, you know. Spend time into figuring out what people might need in their lives. You know, put some time and energy into researching what your audience might want, and then basically put the time and energy into producing it, and it will organically grow your network, you know, slowly as you go. There is a humongous amount of potential, but there is internet is full of totally pointless content. So that's why it's very logical, and it makes sense to spend time and energy into figuring out first, you know, what you want to do and what kind of an impact it's going to make before you actually commit to it. And lastly, design fundamentals. One of the biggest issues that I see designers doing, you know, almost on a daily basis is thinking about design methodology and techniques as sort of a checklist. Like, if I do research, sketching, wireframing, flows, usability testing, visual design, my design is going to be awesome. It doesn't work like that. Design is really not a checklist. It's totally essential to, again, trying to understand the deeper meaning behind each technique, you know, why you're doing it, why is it so important, you know, and once you understand it, then you can break the rules and not blindly follow the sequence step by step, because, you know, sometimes you don't need to do wireframing or sketching. You can skip it if your project is not, for example, suitable for it, or if the business objective is totally different, but you have to be able to understand it so well that you can actually explain why you're skipping this step, for example. So don't think about design as a checklist. Think about it as a sequence of steps of something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be always like this, you know? If you can see the picture, what I have on the slide right now, you know, it's very fluid, but it's very beneficial also to understand it first before you can break the rules. And last kind of a point I want to make about design is just try to keep enjoying it. Paid work is not always enjoyable. It's actually tedious most of the time, you know. The brutal truth of it, in a sense, is that, but don't let that kill your love and passion for design. You know, always try to do something that will keep the fire ablaze, you know, like try to find a side project that will basically keep you motivated and keep you loving the design, like why you started in the first place, right? Like, and that can be something different from everyone, you know, whatever keeps the passion for design burning inside of you, like, please doing it. Don't really be sidelined by the nature of your work that you're going to be doing. Most of it is not going to be enjoyable every day, but it's good to be resilient. But it's essential also to find something to do that will keep the passion and love for design alive, because that's the only way maybe how you're going to keep the design quality of your work extremely high. Because once you lose the passion for design, you know, you're not going to be putting all your potential into your work, and then can eventually undermine, you know, your success as a designer. And this is something I keep thinking about every day. So I just wanted to share this because I know how important it is to do something that excites you on the side, even if it's not sometimes part of a full-time job itself. So that was my last slide. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm so happy that I was able to share this type of content with people. You know, I know that some of these topics and teams have like lots of follow-ups and lots of additional content. So I'm going to be sharing this deck later for everyone to see and use. And also, if there are some questions, if there's time, I'm happy to answer. If not, you can always reach out to me, you know, through the website, through LinkedIn, for something specific that you are curious about.
Hey, thank you, Jan. It was a fantastic presentation. I was listening in the whole time. It was very, very beneficial. I'll get to that in a bit. But we actually have time for one question, and this is a very, very good question. I know we actually have a few coming in, but we have time for one right now. This one comes from Muhammad Zakir. So the question is, we are working in the UI UX industry. Sometimes when we consume or read articles or attend these targeted design webinars, somehow I feel overwhelmed with the tips being shared or the ones that I read. However, we find it a bit difficult when we want to practice these tips and tricks during our design process. Do you have any tips or advice?
Overwhelming amount of content in today's world. Absolutely on point. What I think and what I would advise, every designer is that internet is full of articles on Medium about design, but they are usually very shallow. It's much better if you invest your time to understand, deeply some of the techniques or methodology rather than read, let's say, 40 Medium articles, which are usually only on a shallow level. And I want to answer to this question as well to that you always learn the most by doing, don't do more compared to how much time you spend by reading. Like you're always going to learn a huge amount of stuff by doing things rather than spending time on reading articles and consuming content all the time. So if you're curious about something, always try to put it into a practice, because you're going to learn the most by doing that. You're always going to run into trouble. You're always going to run into different people. So, reading is essential. Yes, absolutely. Learning every day, but doing is even more important, for the sake of your success in the future, especially in design, because design is evolving every day. So really learn by doing is like one of the main points that I think would be awesome for you guys to remember.
All right, absolutely super. Thank you for that question, Muhammad Zakir. And yeah, we're going to have to wrap things up right now because that's all the time we have for today. But we have a couple more questions in the Q&A box, so if you could please answer that. Once your session is ended, that would be absolutely amazing. I just wanted to commend you because I felt that this presentation was absolutely down to earth. And you kind of took a human approach to something which we normally overlook on a daily basis. So I just wanted to thank you for that, especially about the part about adding value to people's lives. I think that touched many of us. So thank you so much for that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the feedback, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, on social media. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of them. So thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Always a pleasure, Jan. Thank you.
Exabytes. Grow your business online.